Welcome, everybody, to Women Rising Wednesdays and to our third interview. Sorry, it's been a long day. Into our third interview with Carol Joy Williams. And I hope that you've watched the last two interviews. And if you haven't and you have any questions or you don't understand why we're doing this and you've just seen it for the very first time, go back and watch the other two. We are just chatting to Carol Williams about her life and her testimony and some of the things that she has, that have happened in her life, and some of the good things, the bad things, and the incredible success that she has made of, first of all, her podcast, which has recently started, called Navigating Life, and second of all, her company that she has co-founded and she's a co-director of, which is called the Stellar Effect, which is South Africa's very first creative audio agency. So, and I got that right without even looking at my notes.
Yeah, very impressed.
So thank you for being here this evening, my friend, today, or evening. Anyway, thank you for being here at this space in time with me.
In this moment, in the Zoom room. It's
There
such
we
a
go. There we go. So in the first interview, we chatted about Carol's Navigating Life podcast. And if you haven't already had a listen and subscribe, then please go and do that. And in the second one, we chatted a lot more about the company that she's co-founder and co-director of, the Stellar Effect, and what they have done within the South African creative landscape thus far. And after every interview, Carol and I do a little debrief. We have a chat afterwards to chat about what we've covered and the subjects that might have come up while we were chatting and things that we were sort of, conscious of or whatever. And so there were some things that came up that were not issues, but things that came up for Carol after last week's interview that I think it's a good idea that we just chat a bit further about those things. So the very first one was, and it was actually my fault, because I asked Carol a question somewhere along the lines of, how does it feel to be a single woman and running a business and all of that kind of thing. And afterwards, when we chatted, when we had our debrief afterwards, she was just said to me that she doesn't love the single woman label, or, because you wouldn't say, like, how do you feel as a married woman doing X or Y or Z? So I just wanted her to...
a single man or a married man.
Or a single man, exactly. Yes, we don't do that. We don't say, Shem, how does it feel to be a single man in the world today?
Yeah, so, and starting a business, we sort of applaud them. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, so that was a label that I, without even thinking about it, completely unwittingly, used. And actually, it's incorrect. And so Carol, just chat us through that, my friend. Just chat us through that whole label thing that we do without even thinking twice.
Well, I guess it is true in that I'm not married, and I like to say I'm not married yet because it is something that I, really want, and I would love to be a wife and a mom and all of those things. But like you said, we don't use that label for married women when they do something, and we don't use it for single men or married men when they do something. It's sort of this thing that gets put on single women, I think, and and I think in some ways that's like a bit of a throwback to like culture, and I mean some culture that still very much exists. I think it's less of a thing these days, but it's still very prevalent. If I think back, I remember when my dad told me a while ago that when he started his teaching career, like quite a long time ago now, but when a woman got married, they had to get like signed permission from their husband to carry on working, and I mean that's in my own dad's lifetime. And that just totally blew my mind, and my grandfather was quite a traditionalist in that sense, didn't really believe in like educating women, so didn't let my aunt study and further than school, but let my dad, so things like that. And so I think I've really always had quite a strong reaction to that label, and maybe some of it because it's like also been like, you know, it being having a husband and a family is a deep desire, so it kind of highlights the fact that that's not there. But I think
Yes.
more than that, it's I think like it becomes this label that often women use to then exclude themselves from things. And then I think it
Yes.
also becomes a label that other people use to exclude single women and sometimes
Yes.
single guys. I think they experience it too, but in my view, I think to a lesser extent.
Yes.
And so, you know, so I was actually listening to a podcast earlier today where this lady was making the point that, you know, um we so good as like you know, and I think especially as Christians, in celebrating things like marriage, and you know, when someone has a baby, we have like these massive parties, and that's
Mm,
awesome and we should celebrate it. But like,
mm.
do we celebrate other life milestones? You know, like when someone starts a business, for example, like
Yes.
do we throw them a party as well? If someone gets out of debt, if someone, I don't know, I think like culturally we've created this environment where it's not always spoken, but like that thing is seen as like a almost like a, okay, this is going to sound extreme and it's not always extreme like this, but it's seen as like a little bit of a disability or like a
Yes.
disqualifier. um
Yes.
and so I mean, I've never been someone for labels. I don't like labels. I've never been someone that fits in a box. I've tried very hard and it made
Mm.
me very depressed. And so yeah, so I think like you know, and I understand the context in which that question was being asked, because we do need to
Yes.
be real about the fact that as women we still you know, we do experience prejudice and we do experience those things. And I think maybe subtly, like there's this, and you know, idea that maybe we wouldn't experience it as much if we were married.
Yes.
Yeah, so like it's very nuanced, and I think it's a very deep subject. But you know, I think like I say, I'm quite passionate about it because, for me, my identity is not wrapped up in my marital status, um,
Yes.
and so, and I think that's a really good thing, because it keeps the desire and the dream for a family in its right place. You
Yes.
know,
Yes.
it doesn't become this qualifier or this disqualifier. It doesn't
Yes.
become a reason why I can or can't do something. Um,
Yes.
it's sort of, it's just a like, you know, a natural progression maybe in life for some people, and for other people maybe not. Um,
Yes.
you know, but I think it's about not letting your identity get wrapped up in this thing. It's like, I've got a purpose and a call as a single
Mm.
woman. I'm going to have a purpose and a call as a married woman. I'm going to have a
Mm.
purpose and a call as a mom, like,
Mm.
and that purpose and call might not shift. It might not shift to like, now suddenly I need to do children's ministry when I become a
Yes.
mom. It
Yes.
might and very likely carry on being in the business and the creative sphere.
Yes.
um it might be teaching men, I don't know, like it might be, who knows what it's going to be like. I
Yes.
think, and I think especially what I've seen in church often is we compartmentalize these things, where it's like, you know, oh, someone's a mom, so they must like have this very like, you know, this heart for children's ministry, and
Mm.
maybe they don't. Maybe they are like, and if they do, that's amazing. Again, it's not that no one, that these things are not wrong or right. It's just like
No.
you need to know what your calling is, and what your purpose is, and God will show you what those things are. And
Yes.
that, in my opinion, has got absolutely nothing to do with whether you're married or not. And
Yes.
and I think that can get fuzzy. I think that can get
Yes.
very fuzzy, and I think it can
Yes.
get confusing. And I think it can be fundamentally like disempowering to people.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so yeah, I'm not a big fan of that
Mm.
terminology. If we did refer to everyone by their marital status of like, oh well, so and so's divorced, like what's it like being a divorced person doing this, or what's it like being
Yes.
a widower, or what's it like,
Yes.
maybe it's a different story, but we don't seem to bring it up unless, you know, it's like, and of course sometimes that label or like, or that phase of life is pertinent to the conversation or pertinent to the topic or pertinent to something, that's a
Mm.
completely different story.
Mm.
If someone needs to go for trauma counseling because they've been through a divorce, then of course that is part of that story. It's not about negating or neglecting that
No,
side of things, but
no.
it's more about how it seems to follow through in like everything, and it becomes like I say, I think it becomes limiting. And I think
Mm.
also it creates these like weird divides between people, um where I'm like, actually, I think, especially as the church, we're supposed to be integrated.
Mm.
um there's like diversity is something to celebrate, both,
Mm.
racial diversity, having different, people, both feel male, men and women, um
Yes,
operating in like their fullness in different
yes.
parts of society, whatever that looks
Mm.
like. And if
Mm.
we allow these labels to stop that, or to prevent it, or to try and control people based on what we think someone should be doing,
Yes.
I think that's extremely legalistic and religious, and I think we run into a lot of problems. And
Mm.
you end up then with situations where someone like a woman, for example, can be a high powered like business leader or like high up in a corporate, and not
Mm.
be allowed to lead in church. And
Mm.
I mean, how do we think that's going to turn out? Like,
Mm.
it doesn't turn out well.
No, no,
Ever.
no. I
Yeah.
think for me, I think what struck me when we had that conversation after the last interview, the thing that struck me was when you said to me, that is not my identity. That
Mm-hmm.
was like that really hit home for me, because I suddenly thought, yes, because being a married woman is not my identity. I am who I am, whether I'm single, married, or anything else. But somehow being a single woman becomes almost, as you said, part of like, oh, that's who you are. That's like your identity. But God has a calling on your life, exactly like you said, and that calling is the gifts and callings are irrevocable, whether you're single or married or whatever else. So it's that actually doesn't, and it was that really gave me pause for thought. Just that thing of like, oh, hang on, yeah, that's not who you are. Who you are is Carol, and that won't change whether you're single or
Yeah.
married or a mom or whatever the
Yeah.
case may be. So I
Yeah.
think that really struck, and I think for all of us, to actually just pay attention to the labels that we use for people, and because it's very, because also, there are so many other single women out there who, as you've said, will take it as part of their identity, and then they won't have the courage to step into what they think God is calling them to, because they're single and they need to actually be married in order to do whatever it is that He's calling them to do, which is actually completely wrong. And God Himself knows. I mean, He
Yeah.
knew, you know, that you would be doing what you're doing now at your age, and you wouldn't be married yet. He knew. So He's obviously made provision for all of that.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's fundamentally unbiblical. Like, if
Mm.
we want to go there, Jesus lived his purpose, and he never got married. Um, and at the same time, I do, I'm not one of those people that is like, single and celibate. I'm like, I can't wait. It's like,
Yes,
there's realities of being in your mid 30s, and like, it's not like you don't you don't have like a sex drive and all of those things. um
yes, yes,
but I think like you're saying, if this becomes my identity now, then I'm also going to be one of those married people that waits around for my husband to say, yes, you can do this, or no, you can't do that. Or
yes.
then it will become an identity then. Or I will always, and I think this is whether it's a marital status, a status of like work, because I think, I can sometimes get like, oh, I'm like a, founder or whatever. Any identity that is not like solely in Jesus will
Yes.
always will yeah, it's never going to deliver what you
Mm.
hope, and you're always going to feel like, oh, when I just have this thing, or when I've just crossed that bridge, or when I'm married, or
Yes,
when I'm this, or when I'm a mom, or when I'm whatever. We always then future dating when God can
yes,
use us, or when
yes,
like this thing is going to happen. And
yes.
like I say, I think we disqualify ourselves, we disqualify
Yes.
other people. And often what I have seen and what I've experienced is that sort of like single woman label comes with like a little bit of like, you know,
Yeah.
shame.
Shame.
What is it
Yeah.
about you that's, you know,
Shame. Yeah.
scares the
Yes.
boys away, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think, yeah, even that's like a very big misunderstanding of the whole thing. And God
Yes.
loved strong women and he created strong women, and we have like biblical examples of strong
Example.
women. And
Amen, sister.
you know, so I, like I say, I just think there's so many things there that need unpacking and relooking and reshaping. We need new language for stuff. We definitely need like new systems.
Mm,
We need things to like shake up in a big way, and I think they
yes.
are. And for me, it's never about making men, and I know this is something on your heart as well, Sally. It's never about making men small. I think
No.
you could probably talk to any men who do know me and friends of mine, and you know, and they wouldn't say that. Like they wouldn't
Mm,
say that I make them feel small
no.
or anything
No.
like that. I have a huge respect for them.
No.
Um, but that, you know, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that need to change and that there aren't like
Absolutely.
systemic things that are just
Yeah.
wrong, you know?
Yeah. No, absolutely. So I think it's a very good lead into the next thing that we chatted about, and that was um, the whole issue of sort of, I suppose you could call it patriarchy or misogyny or any one of those things. But in terms of when I asked you, had you encountered, you know, huge patriarchy or huge misogyny or whatever in the business space as a female,
Mm.
um, and even as a single female, as I said in our last interview, but just as a female in general. And you actually were saying to me something that I've heard from other women as well, other strong business women, that in the business arena, you haven't encountered it as much as we've said, you've just brought up just a few seconds ago, as you've encountered it within the church environment. So could you just speak into that for a minute or two?
Yeah, I think I've been very fortunate in that I haven't experienced it in sort of my professional or workspace,
Mm,
professional capacity. You know, I have my business partner is a man. He is literally like he's the biggest cheerleader of women, you know, just the most
come on.
incredible person. Um, and you know, like, you know, even my dad was very encouraging of my mom and for my mom to pursue a career and things like that.
Mm,
So like I say, in sort of, and you know, I have engaged in corporate spaces, and it's not like I've never had an experience of it. I have, but I think my experience has been limited.
mm,
um but like you say, I have experienced it in church, and I think,
mm.
and this is where I think we have a real problem, is that, you know, the church is supposed to shape culture, not the other way around. And I think
Yes.
one of
And
the reasons
amen.
why we are seeing this is because the church hasn't necessarily been front-footed about it.
Yeah.
Haven't necessarily taken on, and I think there are many reasons, or many things that we haven't done this in. Sort of systemic racism is another one, in my
Yes.
view. But you know, I think the biggest issue is that we have almost a culture of silence that gets developed in the church, where, you know, and sort of a misunderstanding of like what accountability is, and sort of we often have this like guise of it, but actually there isn't anything real. And
Yes.
so instead of being a safe space for women, it becomes a very not safe space for women.
Yes.
You know, and that obviously, I mean, we've seen so many scandals rocking rocking the news recently.
Yes.
Almost every single week there are things that are being uncovered, and I really feel like that is something that God is doing at the moment,
Yes.
really uncovering things. Yeah, so I think that Yeah, like I say, instead of shaping culture, we're actually like quite far behind. And so
Yes,
where sort of general culture is quite and I'm going to use this word and I know it is loaded, but they are quite woke in terms of like women's issues and
yes,
about equality in the workplace. Also there are more policies driving that kind of thing.
yes,
Um, I think there's been more reason to change. Whereas I
yes,
think in the church, like there's been less reason. There's a whole lot of theological debate still.
yes.
There's a lot of like, oh, well, yeah, a lot of double standards,
Mm,
where one thing is acceptable for this
mm,
person, but it's not acceptable in this. And I think we really have like a big gap often in those
mm.
in those things. And I think that's where things like patriarchy and misogyny and abuse and all of those things thrive. um
Yes,
and it's that sort of very fertile soil of like silence and manipulation and all of those ugly things, which
yes,
in my
yeah,
view we could do better, and
yeah.
this is not to shame anyone or to kind of put
No,
anyone,
no.
but I
But
think
like
that
you said,
mm,
it's in the silence that it becomes, it's all the things that are done in secret and never spoken about or never acknowledged. And the thing is that in worldly culture or even in business culture, I mean, things are far from perfect, in terms of glass ceilings for women and stuff like that. I mean, things are not perfect, but at least they're moving in a direction. They are being pushed along and spurred on and kind of pushed forward. Those issues are being addressed. Everything might not be exactly the way we would like it to be, but they are being addressed. It's almost as if in the church those conversations just aren't had. It's just not talked about. It's just not addressed. And if it is raised, then it's shut down because it's generally a woman raising it.
mm,
So I think that's, and I mean, my heart on all of this, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to start this women rising thing, is specifically for within the church space, that actually women will start speaking up and speaking out, because for as long as these things are kept in the secret, in the darkness, nothing gets done about them. But once the light of truth is shone on them, then something can actually be done. But it is also so wrong, exactly like you've said, that the church always behind on this. We're always
mm,
trying to catch up, we're never ahead, and I think that it's the times and the seasons have come for the church to actually start being on the front foot rather than on the back foot, and actually go running ahead of the world rather than trying to, play
yeah.
catch up all the time.
Or and then also playing catch up, but also being quite judgmental of movements like Me Too and
Yes.
Black Lives Matter. Sorry, I'm getting a bit controversial here, Sally, but um,
Okay. That's where
but
it's
sort of being very like judgy of those spaces. But I'm like, okay, but where are you in this conversation? You can't
yes,
be here on the side like judging everyone else when actually it's like, what's your own house looking like? Is your
yes,
own house in order? And if it's not, then I would keep quiet,
yes,
because whatever that stuff is rooted in, there's an element of justice and truth there. And
yes,
the fact that those movements became global movements so quickly tells me that it's a shared experience all over the
yes,
world.
yes,
And
absolutely.
so it's like, okay, what is that actually telling us, and
Mm,
what are we bringing to that space? And
mm,
there's always three options. It's the world's way, it's religion's way, or it's the way of Jesus. And
yes, yes,
Jesus, he championed women.
yes,
um and it's like he advocated for women. He was um and so again, I think like often we read the Bible, like, so we'll read about, like, say, I know this is something that struck you as well, reading like the Old Testament and like the patriarchal kind of vibe there also.
yes.
But it's not like that is not like saying this is how we should live. It's more
No,
recording how life was. And
yes,
it was like, but God's standard is a different standard. And
yes, yes,
sometimes I feel like we read it like super literally and like almost excuse things like that and say, oh, but you know what, like David was this, or Solomon this, or so and so had this. And it's like, yeah, because they were human, and like all of us are human, and I completely get it. But
Yes.
they are not the standard. Like
Yes.
Jesus is the standard. And how did Jesus treat sinners? How did Jesus treat
Yes.
women? How did Jesus
Yes.
kind of operate in those spaces?
Yes. Exactly.
And
And I mean,
that's what we should want, not
exactly. And I mean, that's even what I've said before is, you know, we're supposed to be becoming more Christ-like and actually following in Jesus' footsteps and being more like Jesus. And yet we get caught up in theology around things that Paul, for example, said, that and we develop a theology that is the opposite actually of the way Jesus acted. And then but at the same time we're trying to be more like Christ, and that actually doesn't, you can't have it both ways. You know, you have it one way or the other way. You actually can't have it both ways.
And
But
I'm sorry,
no,
that creates what's actually in like psychological terms cognitive, it's called cognitive dissonance. And
yes,
so that's why often you'll feel so confused in a space where
yes,
something is preached and said, but your experience of it is something completely different. And
yes,
that's that exact thing where it's like you've actually, because your actions actually always reveal what you truly believe. And
mm,
so, and I think that becomes evidence when someone is preaching one message but living a different message. It's that exact thing where they haven't actually internalized, they haven't been transformed by
yes,
the life of Jesus in that particular area. And again, we are all in that boat in different things. um,
absolutely.
but I do think that this issue of this, particularly around patriarchy and
Mm,
misogyny in the church, is something that
mm,
like needs urgent
mm,
attention.
mm. No, no, absolutely. Conversations need to be had and things need to be spoken about.
Yeah,
But
and
so,
action needs to be
yes,
taken. You know what I mean?
yes, yes,
Like,
yeah. So one of the things you mentioned now was the whole thing around like the abuse, the scandals of abuse that have taken place, you know, sort of in recent church history. And obviously we all know stories from way back when, and you know, they just constantly these things happening. And that was the other thing that we were chatting about, that just that it's very difficult to find a woman amongst our circle of friends, amongst the people we know, who hasn't experienced some form of gender-based violence, be it be it assault, be it emotional abuse, be it even verbal abuse, any of those things. I'm just thinking as well about the Me Too movement. You know, the fact that you actually cannot find almost a friend in your circle of friends that hasn't been subjected to some form of gender-based abuse, maybe not violence in terms of, you know, the physical violence, but some form of gender-based abuse, and the shame that that carries with it. And then to add insult to injury, the fact that so much of that has happened within the church space, in a space where women are supposed to be safe, where everyone is supposed to be safe, all people are supposed to be safe, but for women particularly, you know, there's supposed to be a space where they are safe and protected and looked after, not because they can't look after themselves, but you understand what I'm saying. So yeah, so just yeah, chat into that a little bit. Just that's the
you
thing
know,
about shame. Yeah.
yeah, I think like as I've got older, I've realized that very shocking thing that,
Mm,
yeah, pretty much no one I know has not had some form of that, like you said.
mm,
And it might not be recent, it might have been when they were younger, it might have
mm,
been, yeah, it might be recent. I think a lot of it is so insidious. And, I've just been becoming more aware of things like, I wanted to go for a walk this afternoon on the
mm,
pack track.
mm,
And then I was like, actually, I don't want to go on my own. You know, and it's these considerations, and I'm not saying that like sometimes guys don't have to make those considerations. I'm just saying they have to make them less.
Yes. Yes.
And that is just like part of our armor that we almost like put on every day. Is like, you know, you kind of always, you know, looking around, like, what's my environment? Am I safe? If I'm walking down the road, like, are there people around? And I think that becomes just like part of how we operate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I say, it has been kind of shocking to realize that it is like just everywhere, you know. And you know, and I think for me, there's actually a huge amount of compassion that I feel for men, because there's something wrong there. Like,
Yes.
you know, if that's how you're behaving, or if
Yes.
that's like the general kind of, you know, if women are experiencing it like that,
Yes.
um, you know, then there's something very broken there, and
Yes.
there's a lot of healing that needs to happen there.
Yes.
You know, and I think like, yeah, that's really where my heart is. And I know, again, this is something that you've also felt quite passionate about, is, and also
Yes.
really felt God speaking into, around like what true partnership looks like. You know,
Yes.
like, what did the Garden of Eden look like before the fall? And
Yes.
that was equality. Yes,
Yes.
maybe the roles were different, but that was like shoulder to shoulder. We are going to kind of, you know, we are going to live in this space and rule it together. And I think like basically since then, and it's like all through scripture, but and obviously since then, like, the enemy has tried his level best to keep that separate and to break that up, you know.
Yeah.
um you know, and to almost like oppose us, put
Yes.
us against each other.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I think, you know, just to go back to what you were saying about, yeah, like the fact that all of those experiences lead to a deep sense of shame. um,
Yes.
and that most women I know have had a long journey with shame.
Mm. Mm.
And that it's one of those things which, I think like if you're just unaware, it's almost like this thing you just carry around with you that you like don't even
Yes.
know. You don't even know. It's like almost like wearing a pair of glasses, and that's kind of how
Yes.
you see yourself and how you see the world
You
and how
don't
you
even
see,
think about it. Yeah.
and you don't even think about it.
Yeah.
And I think often with victim shaming culture, which is also a lot of what we see, where it's like, oh, well, it wasn't that bad, or, you know, at least it wasn't rape, it was just, they just,
Yeah.
you know, like,
Yes.
at least it's that kind of language, and that's actually called gaslighting, you know, where you make
Yes.
someone feel like their experience wasn't as bad as it was, or that it didn't happen like how they
Yes.
remember it, or whatever.
Yes. 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 Or like
And
it could have been worse. You know, it could have been
yeah, or like
worse.
men are also abused or whatever. It's like, yes,
Yeah.
okay, like that's true, but like, let's just, if we can just look at the numbers, like, can we
Yes.
just acknowledge that? And
Yes.
um yeah, so I think it's just recognizing that, and that shame is not like, it's not, again, like going back to that identity stuff, like that's not the identity that God has for you.
No. No.
um and you know, there's this Brene Brown thing, I think I mentioned it last time, where it's like, guilt is, there's, you know, I did something wrong, and shame is the feeling that there's something wrong with me, like I'm
Yes.
wrong, you know, there's something
Yes.
fundamentally wrong about who I am as a person.
Yes.
Yeah, and that thing will keep you in bondage, you know, and it's, again, like, that was not part of God's plan for you. And
No.
especially in spaces where you've been made to be silent, because you know, just like, you know, we'll sort it out, but can you just like not out this person
Yes.
because they're actually in
Yes.
leadership, they're actually whatever,
Yes.
like
Don't rock
that.
the boat.
Don't
You
rock
know.
the boat. And
Yes.
you know, that actually, I've seen it in my own like circle, that
Mm.
shatters a person,
Yes.
you know. And
Yes.
then we mustn't be surprised when people's sexuality is actually really broken, like
Exactly.
often beyond repair. And I'm like, well, what did you expect? And again,
Yes.
then don't judge you do not have one space until you eradicate any kind of abuse, any kind
Yes.
of anything in the church. You do not have
Yes.
one leg to stand on, in my
No.
opinion, in
No.
terms of like gender issues and that kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah. And as we've spoken about before, we know, we know people who have chosen a different sexual orientation because of what they've been through with in their own lives in terms of abuse and assault and things like that. And so because a man is no longer a safe space, and they're often people who've been betrayed by men closest to them, and then the only alternative actually is to find a safe space within their own gender, and which actually you can't, as you've just said, you cannot stand in judgment until you are taking a stand to eradicate the actions that lead to people not feeling safe with the opposite sex. You actually can't stand in judgment of anybody who makes that choice because of what they've been through in their own lives.
100%, yeah.
So that brings us to our very last topic for this evening.
We've got like some saucy vibes here.
We've got like 5 minutes left. We're over time again, but so what? These are all important topics. So the very last thing I just wanted to touch on was something that we've both chatted about and something that we've both experienced, and also something, just going back to what you said near the beginning of the interview, when you were talking about how if you got married, somebody would throw you a huge party. If you had a baby, somebody would throw you a huge party. But like when you started your business, nobody threw you a huge party, you know?
No, it was like crickets.
Yeah, exactly. And from the perspective of women celebrating and supporting women. So just that whole thing of like, even as women, and you can call it societal conditioning or just the culture that we've grown up in, where we celebrate things like weddings and babies, and we don't celebrate, debt release and businesses and things. But the only way we're going to get beyond that is if we start talking about it. So just that whole thing of and I know in the very first interview, I think it was, we spoke about your boss, your women boss, who was so supportive of you and so like tried to create an atmosphere where you could actually be everything that you needed to be. And we were talking about how that is just often not the case with women and women, and how just as much as far as men, have their role to play, women are sometimes women's own worst enemies. And so maybe just chat into that for a few minutes, the whole thing of women on women.
Yes, 100%. Like I've experienced that also. I think most of us probably have. Where you're seen as I don't know if it's competition or it's like I don't know exactly. I think jealousy plays a big role in it, or insecurity.
Yes.
Kind of, when you stop being the person that this person thinks you are, or the friendship shifts because actually you've got different priorities or whatever it is.
Yes.
And then that becomes like a big issue.
Mm.
Where women will actively, I mean, I haven't experienced this, but like women will actively like set out to destroy someone else. Like it's
Yes.
it's quite, I find it quite hard to wrap my head around that.
Yes.
And I think it's, I think it's a scarcity mindset in my opinion. I think that's part of it. Where,
Yes.
it's the belief that there's not enough to go around, or
Yes.
there's
Yes.
like, if you have this thing, then I can't have it. Which is
Yes.
rubbish. It's like,
Yes.
if again, like depending on what you call to, and all of these things, and also like what you actually position yourself for in your life. Like the sky really is the limit. And yes, we
Yes.
have got limitations in many ways, still, because of gender and all of those things. But I mean, one of the reasons why I decided to start my own business, and I think it might have been subconsciously, was like, you know what, if I start my own thing, I get to make the rules.
All the stuff.
I get to
I
call
need to
the
be
shots.
boss.
I don't have to deal with like someone who has like an issue with me being a woman. Like I can
Yes.
just bypass all those
Yes.
things. Anyway,
Yes.
but yeah, I think in terms of like women supporting women, I have seen like a lot more of that type of narrative growing. Sort of female communities growing around entrepreneurship. I mean, it's my space. Even
Yes.
like around the arts, I've also, I'm part of like one or two Facebook groups or whatever. And I think that is really the way forward, where
Yes.
and not in like this, again, this like weird sisterhood thing that we like hate men, not at all. It's just
No.
like, can we see someone doing something like starting a business or wanting to get a promotion or wanting to get out of debt or like being a freaking awesome stay-at-home mom,
Mm.
but needing support? And are we
Yes.
are we able, within our capacity and within our boundaries and like all of those things, are we able to actually like show up for each other?
Yes. Yes.
And I think it's actually a maturity thing, where
Mm.
it's like, are we
Mm.
challenging ourselves to mature and grow?
Mm.
Do we understand that there really is enough to go around? Are
Yes.
we okay with the fact that everyone is differently gifted? And actually, I maybe there will always be people who have less than you and always people that have more than you.
Yes.
And can you learn contentment and like to rest in those spaces and where God has got you?
Yes.
Um, and like what he's opening up in your life, and recognizing that actually I don't need to compete with people.
Mm.
Like that's an orphan spirit in my
Mm.
opinion. And like,
Mm.
I mean, I still have to work on this. I still sometimes see people who I know who I feel like are like having it easier than I am, or like getting more opportunities than me, and I often have to check my heart and go like, oh, that was actually a yucky thing that came out. Like
Yes.
it maybe didn't come out in person, but I like know what's in my heart and what's in my head.
Yes.
And like
Yes. Yes.
in those moments, do I go to the Lord and do I say, you know what, that was like so yuck. I'm so
Mm.
sorry. And like,
Mm.
show me, what is this? Is this bitterness? Is it jealousy? Like, what is it? Am I insecure? Why am
Yes.
I feeling insecure? Does this just feel unfair? And also like let him acknowledge those things and then be like, okay, that's cool. If someone gets married, or like I've been a bridesmaid 8 times, that can start feeling like a lot when
Yes.
you want that also.
Yes.
But like,
Yes.
am I able to celebrate all of my friends who get married, all
Yes.
of my friends who get engaged, all of my friends who become moms, who
Mm.
who do those, who cross those life
Mm.
sort of things before I do? Um,
Yes.
or if you're the person who's like always wanted to start a business, can you look at me and go like, wow, that's actually so
Yes.
cool, rather than seeing it as like, this deficit on your side? Like, can you
Mm.
just celebrate and actually come and like talk to me, and not assume a whole lot of
Yes.
things about my story? Yeah, so I think that's kind of what I would say is like,
Yes.
just like, we don't need to be competitive.
No.
I think we can be supportive. I think we can create a culture of honor amongst women. I think we can create
Yes.
spaces where we really encourage women to flourish, where we really like, we see like, so that same boss of mine, like she launched her first business yesterday, and I
Oh
was
wow.
so excited because
Oh, God.
she was such a massive part of my story, and
Yeah.
I'm like so excited to see her like do her thing now.
Yes. Come on.
And it's like I say, it's about like, and I feel like that is something that we get to practice. It's like
Mm.
you practice getting excited, you practice, and that might
Mm.
sound like a bit weird, but you practice that response, um,
Yes.
and not the response. Because if you keep on rehearsing the response of like, or like, I'm actually quite sorry for myself, and like that person always
Yes.
gets whatever, and like,
Yes.
you actually basically saying to God, my life isn't great, or
Yes.
like there's nothing about my life that I see your grace in, or whatever.
Yes.
I'd rather
Yes.
have so and so's life.
Yes.
And it's like, you never know what that person is walking through,
No.
and
No.
what challenges come along with their things. And you know what? Actually, if someone's having like an easier patch in life, flip. We should just be
Yes.
like, wow, that's awesome. I'm so happy
That's
for you.
yes.
You know?
Yes. Yes. So it
Um,
actually starts with each one of us. It starts with each one of us. even if we feel like we can't make a difference, you know, in some of these enormous topics that we've spoken about tonight, like patriarchy and misogyny and gender-based violence, even if we feel that we can't make a difference in some of those areas, they just seem too big for us. We can, each one of us as women, the least we can do is actually celebrate and support other women. That's actually the least we can do, because if we each decide to do that, like you said, if we each practice that, then already you're starting, you know, a movement, you know, because as you celebrate and support someone, you know, they will celebrate and support someone, because when women start to see that we can do that, and as you've said, there's enough for everybody, we don't have to compete in this, you know, in this life, we can, because we're all walking out God's calling on our lives, then it will gradually become something that people, we can change culture just by each one of us choosing to do that very thing and celebrate other women.
So true. And you know, it can be something as basic. I mean, something I'm trying to do is to, like, when I can, like, buy from a local business instead of like going to a big chain store. Like, that's just something that I've seen in my life is something that I can do. So if I could buy a dress for like 300 Rand at Mr. Price or H&M or whatever, and I can rather support like a friend of mine who is a business owner, you know, it can be as practical as that.
Yes.
You know, and again, it's not always possible. Maybe budgets don't always allow for it or whatever, but I think for me it's about starting to cultivate that awareness of, like, what does supporting someone actually look like? Maybe it looks like going to their show, or it looks like buying from their business, or it looks like just messaging them. That doesn't cost you anything, like, except 3 minutes or something of like yeah. So like I say, it doesn't have to be this, you know, you don't have to invest in their business necessarily. It doesn't have to cost you lots of money. It literally can just be an encouraging word, or like, wow, I see, like, you know, I always say to this one friend of mine who's a stay-at-home mom, and it's like quite tiring, I think. And she just says, I always say to her, you know what, you're such a freaking awesome mom. And like, she never hears that or doesn't often hear that.
No.
And you know, like, yeah, we just need encouragement. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that's something that is like the baseline. It's like the very least that we can do.
It's the very least, yeah. I mean, I get, every now and again, I get emails from women. I'll just get an email or a message from someone just saying, like, that they've watched some of my stuff and how it's impacted them, you know. And then I spoke to somebody the other day, and they were saying, wow, you know, they read something of mine and they were so impacted by it. And I said to her, oh, like, that's amazing, you know, I didn't know. And she said, yes, I was going to email you, and then I just thought, you probably get emails from so many people. And you see, that's the thing. People see you, particularly with an online thing. They think, you've got it. Looks like you've got it all together. You know exactly what you're doing. You're putting yourself out there online. You have it all together. And it's so not the truth, you know. And so when people do email me, when someone takes the time to send me an email to tell me that I was impacted by, that they were impacted by something, a teaching I released or something, I email them back and say to them, you literally have no idea what that means to me. Because often it's on the days when I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't think I'm making any difference. You know, why am I? Who listens to me? It's often on those days when God will use somebody to send me an email and to be like, well done, thank you so much for something. And it's just, I just think we don't always realize how much just words of support and words of encouragement mean actually to people. And like you said about when stay-at-home mom, you know, stay-at-home moms often feel like they're just not contributing to the world, because all they're doing, you know, is staying at home looking after their children. And yet that's such an important job. But very few people say to a mom, wow, you're an amazing mom. And you find if you do say that to a mom, like, literally they get tears in their eyes, because they just never hear it, you know. It's just like, oh my word, somebody thinks I'm doing this well. So so I think that that is definitely a baseline for us all, is to start with just a few words of support and encouragement to the women that we come across in our lives. Doesn't cost anything, doesn't take any time, just to be like, wow, you do that really well, like, you know, or you impacted me in some way. Anyway, we're now like, we've used up so much time.
We dived into some pretty big topics there, so.
It is quite difficult to fit everything that we spoke about tonight into like a half an hour segment. I mean, that was just impossible.
Yeah.
So, my friend, are we going to do a Facebook Live, do you think?
Yes, I think,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the Wednesday, the 28th of April, Carol and I will do a Facebook Live where you will get to be able to come on and ask questions. It's probably a good idea to just email me some questions before the time. Or if you know Carol personally or whatever, message Carol, whatever it is, just send the questions in first so that we have a little bit of time to just prepare ourselves for the questions that could be answered. But otherwise, you know what, you can come online. You can ask questions, and if we don't know the answers, we'll just say we don't know the answers.
Yeah.
But so it will be Wednesday, the 28th of April. And what time do you reckon, my friend? Is 7 good for you? 7:30?
7.
Okay. So we'll do Facebook Live Wednesday, the 28th of April from 7 to 8. So we do 7 to 8, yeah, from 7 to 8. And in the meantime, I'm going to have to ask Carol to teach me how to do that because I have no idea. But anyway,
I don't know if I know either. I know Instagram Live. I don't know. I'll Google it though. That's how I'm learning everything.
So please join us on next Wednesday, the 28th of April at 7 p.m. for a live Q&A with Carol Joy Williams, and you get to find out a whole lot more about the things that we have been chatting about. And in the interim, message, email, reach out if you've got any questions. If you've got questions you want to be answered on the 28th, that's absolutely fine. Or if you've just got things you want to chat about, or if you've experienced some of these things that we've spoken about in your own life and you've never spoken to anybody about it, you know, then reach out. Chat, you know, send me an email, arise@sallygoodwin.com, you know, just reach out because these things need to be brought out into the open. So thank you so much, my friend, for all of the wisdom that you have imparted this evening. I so appreciate you.
Yes, likewise.
And thank you to everybody for watching, and we shall see you on Wednesday the 28th. Love you lots. Be blessed. Good night. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.